Welcome, weary traveller. Tonight I want to tell you a story. Not just any story, but one about silk and sorrow, about mothers and daughters, about the lies we tell ourselves and the truths we bury so deep we forget they exist. This is the story of Hollow Knight, Silksong, and why it might just be one of the greatest games ever made. So settle in, let your shoulders drop, let your jaw unclench, and let me take you to a kingdom called Farloom, where an ancient god sleeps in a cradle of thread, dreaming of devotion. Before we talk about what Farloom became, we need to talk about what it was. Picture a world of abundance, blue seas teeming with life where now there is only windswept sand, pristine streams feeding fertile soil where now toxic sludge festers and bubbles. This was Farloom in its innocence, before the silk, before the song, before everything went wrong. The regions we now know as the Sea of Karak were not deserts but thriving underwater kingdoms. Where Bilewater now chokes on the Citadel's waste, clean rivers once flowed through verdant valleys. This was an age of verdure, of natural abundance, of civilizations that rose from the bounty of the land rather than the exploitation of the faithful. 4 great civilizations thrived here, each carving their own mark into history. The Scar were ants, fierce and disciplined, led by their song queen Carmelita. She used her voice like a weapon, not to harm but to unite. When she sang, her people moved as one. They adorned themselves in bones which they used as fashion accessories and weapons, and set traps across their territory. Hunters from birth, every single one of them. The Scar Guard, the Scar Stalker, the Scar Scout, all trained from the moment they could walk to serve their queen. Only the greatest among them would be considered worthy enough to defend Carmelita herself. One specific Scar named Gur the Outcast was known as an expert hunter, always willing to tackle larger and larger prey, with kills proudly displayed in their room like trophies. Not all were suited for combat, of course. Creatures like the Scarwing could hunt, but were used as support for the larger ants. The Scarids were trained like real ants to collect scraps and spoils and bring them back to base. But make no mistake, the Scar were warriors first and everything else second. For these hunters, bold, stalk proud, roam far. For you, my children, for you I sing. That was Carmelita's anthem, and her people lived by it. To the northwest, in waters that no longer exist, the Crus Kingdom built their power on the blade. Crus King Khan ruled from his coral tower, a place that could be described as a vertical coral reef, commanding warriors so loyal they would die standing at attention. And they did. The Karak legions were fearless and faithful, an entire kingdom built upon their blades. The coral that grew naturally in their waters became not just shelter, but weapon, fused into their armaments and fortifications. The trisnet, the conflies, the Karak blade bugs, all relied on their native coral for defence. Khan expected much from his people, but they were eternally loyal, willing to put their lives on the line for him without question. When Hornet finds them, they're still there, frozen in formation, crusted over like terracotta soldiers, still guarding a king who turned to stone beside them. Only one soldier remains alive, if you can call it that. He's been standing watch so long that time itself has stiffened his shell. There's something haunting about that image, isn't there? A warrior so devoted that even death couldn't make him abandon his post. Even now, centuries later, he watches over the edge of their land, waiting for an enemy that will never come. Shelwood was different from the other kingdoms. No single ruler, no unified tribe. Just an ecosystem, predators and prey locked in an eternal dance, all of it watched over by Nihilith, a primordial plant being who was the forest's heart. She didn't rule, she simply was, described as the ancient heart of Shellwood, connected to all its living things. Nihilith was guided by a benevolent directive to grow, settle, seed, twist, wind, protect, and maintain the healthy but delicate ecosystem. And while she existed, safe passage was guaranteed to anyone who walked beneath her branches. Like many forests and swamps in the real world, Shellwood was an ecosystem run by and for the creatures that inhabited it. Predators hunted prey, while those same predators could be prey to others. Hornet notes in her journal that the destruction of even a single species, like the wood wasp nest, could be dangerous for Shellwood's order, as removing a creature from the ecosystem could tip the balance. Each creature lived for itself and shared the land with others who also sought to protect themselves. It was nature in its purest form, beautiful and brutal in equal measure. Then there was Verdania, the most beautiful of all, ruled by two princes who were lovers. They called them the Clover Dancers, and their people adored them for the grace they brought to everything, even violence. Inside Lost Verdania, we come across a lore tablet that tells their story in part. Two children born entwined apart. Two children marked to rule. They danced, they sang, proved blades beyond, but none forgot their birth. For lovers born on beat exact shall be forever cursed. When outsiders threatened their land, the princes would perform a ballet of death. Blades flashing in perfect synchronization. It was terrifying. It was gorgeous. It was love made lethal. The bugs of Verdania were especially enthralled by the ways of their ballet of death, using both violence and dance to attack any outsider who posed a threat to their land. Creatures like the Vendanier and the Kinderir defended their territory with the same grace their princes displayed. For a time, this was the land of Farloom. Very few records exist from back then, so we aren't exactly sure of the relationships between these tribes, or even amongst themselves. But we know they existed, we know they thrived, and we know that everything changed when a higher being arrived. This was the world before Grandmother Silk, and then she did, and everything changed. What is a pale being? Hornet asks herself this question throughout the game, and she never quite likes the answer. Pale beings are higher beings, gods essentially, but with a specific hunger. They need worship, they need devotion. It's not a choice for them, not really. Dominance, Hornet says, is baked deep in their blood. Higher beings in the world of Hollow Knight are beings who have otherworldly powers. The Pale King of Hallownest was able to bestow his people with sapience, enabling them to think and act with purpose and reason, but only within the confines of his kingdom. The Radiance, Un, the Nightmare Heart from the Grim Troop. These are all higher beings, but pale beings are different. The Pale King and the White Lady from Hallownest are both pale beings and higher beings. According to Hornet, pale beings seem to have an innate desire to want worship or power, whether that be establishing their own kingdom or replacing the leader of one that already exists. The Pale King was once a worm who renounced his old form to be like his subjects. He would then later serve as ruler, where most of Hallownest would revere him as their leader. Grandmother Silk operates the same way. She's described as the primal source of all silk, a higher being whose very essence is woven into the fabric of reality. Silk in the world of Silksong is described as fine thread spun from the soul of its creator, highly coveted for its remarkable strength and mystical properties. It can heal wounds, extend life, and be woven into powerful runes. A magical substance in bug kind, silk demonstrates the power of Grandmother Silk. She may be the progenitor of all silk in the Hollow Knight universe, the weavers of Deepnest in Hallownest, the spiders who would later serve under Hera the Beast. They too produce silk, and their silk came from Farloom, brought when they fled from the land of their origin. The implication is profound. Grandmother Silk may be the source of all silk in the world. Her power is the wellspring from which this mystical substance flows. She didn't arrive in Farloom looking for compromise. She didn't send diplomats or negotiate treaties. She came because she wanted to be worshipped, and she would accept nothing less than absolute fealty. Devotion or destruction, Hornet says. These are the only fates my kind allow. The existing kingdoms, with their strong-willed rulers and established traditions, were obstacles. Crust King Khan had his loyal warriors. Carmelita had her disciplined Scar. The princes of Verdania had their deadly grace. These were not bugs who would bow easily. So Grandmother Silk didn't bother conquering them directly. Instead, she made her own people. Picture a Farlid. Just a common bug, nothing special, scurrying through the underbrush. Now picture Grandmother Silk reaching down with threads of pure soul stuff, wrapping that little creature in a silk and pulling. The Farlid stretches, changes, grows. Legs multiply, eyes sharpen. Intelligence floods in like water filling a vessel. When the silk falls away, what remains is no longer a Farlid, it's a weaver. This transformation is shown in the end cutscene for a boss known as the First Sinner. We see a small spider slowly transform into a weaver, thanks to the thread of silk, implying that Grandmother Silk had been behind this elevation. This is how the weavers were born, not through natural reproduction, not through evolution, but through the deliberate act of a god who needed servants. Grandmother Silk called them her daughters. She told them they were divine, special, chosen, and because they had no memory of being anything else, they believed her. They worshipped her. They sang for her, endless songs of devotion, their voices weaving together into harmonies that fed her power. The weavers were gifted with remarkable abilities. Within their own shells they could produce silk, the mystical substance that was the essence of their mother's power. They could manipulate this silk with extraordinary skill, weaving it into magical runes that could accomplish wondrous and terrible things. They could create advanced technologies, as evidenced by the sophisticated equipment found in the weave nests scattered throughout Farloom. Perhaps most significantly, they could strum melodies, lilting songs that clouded minds and bent wills, allowing them to influence and control other bugs with their music. As the midwife in Deepness relates in the first game, amazing things the weavers once crafted on their looms. Stories, shields, spells. So much of our history was spun upon their spools. For a time, this was enough. The weavers were happy in their ignorance, proud of their supposed divinity, content to serve a mother who loved them, or so they thought. A silk memory of Widow, the only weaver who would remain loyal to Grandmother Silk even after her siblings fled, shows the weavers playing harps while Grandmother Silk watches over them. The dialogue accompanying this vision reveals the nature of their task. For her light eternal, our song sustains. The harps they played can still be found in the cradle at the top of the Citadel, fallen completely into disuse. Relics of a time when the weavers directly served their mother. But buried deep within this act of creation was a terrible truth. The weavers were not divine. They were not special by nature. They were simply mortal beasts raised in ability to shower their creator with faith and devotion. They were slaves, elevated in form but bound in purpose, created solely to serve the will of Grandmother Silk. This truth, hidden from their collective memory, would remain concealed for a long time. But truths have a way of emerging, no matter how deeply they are buried. The first sinner changed everything. We don't know her real name. History only remembers what she did. She was a weaver, exceptionally skilled in the manipulation of silk, able to weave runes of blazing power that none of her sisters could match. Her hunter's journal entry notes that this one's husk held a masterful talent to weave silk into blazing runes. Throughout my life, I've seen runes woven for many tasks. Was she the first to hone such skills? And somewhere in her explorations of that power, she found something she wasn't supposed to find. A memory. The memory. The moment of creation, preserved in silk like an insect in amber. From the webbed aesthetic of memories and their connection to silk-fueled entities throughout the game, it appears that memories of Farloom's past are tied to silk itself. Perhaps the first sinner's extraordinary skill in weaving allowed her to access the most distant, most restricted memories contained within silk. Perhaps in exploring the depths of her power, she accidentally uncovered the memory of her own people's transformation, the hidden truth that Grandmother Silk had deliberately concealed. She saw what she had been before, a Farlid, a nothing. A bug elevated not because she was special, but because Grandmother Silk needed worshippers. The divinity was a lie. The love was a lie. Everything was a lie. She called us daughters, the first sinner would later say. She called us divine. She lied. Her needle in dialogue during the boss fight reveals her anguish. Cursed by silk, cursed with silk, cursed to know the sin, the truth, cursed to know. She views her knowledge as a curse, a burden that destroyed her peace and any illusion of purpose. She was cursed by the silk that gave her power, cursed with the silk that bound her to servitude, and cursed to know the truth that her entire existence was a lie. What do you do when you discover your entire existence is built on deception? The first sinner chose rebellion. She spoke the truth to her sisters, tried to wake them from their comfortable delusion. Some listened, many didn't. The weavers who ran the emerging religious system couldn't afford to have their divinity questioned. So they did what powerful institutions always do when faced with inconvenient truth. They silenced it. The first sinner was dragged to the slab, Farloom's prison, and locked in a cage sealed with runes. A law tablet placed over her cage provides her formal accusation. Penitent, first of the first. Guilty of the sin of apostasy. Penance by constriction. Absolution denied. Apostasy is the abandonment or renunciation of a religious belief. Her crime was listed as apostasy. Her sentence was eternal. She would never be forgiven. She would never be released. She would simply exist, suspended between life and death, a warning to anyone else who might think about questioning the established order. The cage that holds the first sinner bears the symbol of the Citadel, the image of a silk cocoon inside a crook that would become the emblem of Farloom's religious system. This strongly suggests that the first sinner was imprisoned not by Grandmother Silk directly, but by her fellow weavers, by the leadership of the society that would later build the Citadel. They imprisoned one of their own to protect their claim to divinity. to prevent the truth from spreading and destroying the foundation of their power over the lesser bugs of Farloom. They would rather imprison one of their own sisters than admit they were not divine beings. But you can't kill an idea by imprisoning the person who spoke it. The truth was out. And slowly, quietly, the rebellion began. Let your eyes rest for a moment. Feel the weight of your body sinking into whatever surface supports you. The story continues, but there's no rush. Time moves differently in Farloom. Generations pass like breaths. Wars are fought and forgotten. Gods sleep and wake. And through it all the silk keeps spinning. The weavers who believed the first sinner's revelation faced an impossible problem. Grandmother Silk was a god. They were her creations, fragments of her power given form. How do you fight something that made you? How do you defeat a being whose essence runs through your very veins? They couldn't. Not directly. So they got clever. They built hidden tunnels called weave nests, shrouded in wards that blocked Grandmother Silk's vision. There's a theory that Grandmother Silk is physically blind, that she instead sees through the vibrations in her silken strands, that she senses the subtle aura of soul emanating from others. The weavers might have learned to cut her vision to protect their secret enterprise. A lore tablet in Weavernest Atla explains their purpose. This low, her gaze escaped. Prepare, sisters. Weave hope anew, that we might break free this accursed web born of our naive foundation. Down there, in the dark, they experimented. They tried to create weapons that could bind a god. They built something called the Snare Setter, a trap designed to hold beings of immense power. A lore tablet near it corroborates this by saying, "To bind her tight, to keep us free." The mysterious Eva herself, one of their experiments, describes their efforts. There my mothers built their tools, all traps and bindings, small things but tests for larger forms. I still remember their thoughts as they worked, their desperation and their hunger. Another hopeless attempt to wrest their freedom. All ended in failure, of course. Eva was another desperate experiment, an attempt by the weavers to create their own divine being, a creature spun entirely from silk, who might possess the power to usurp or defeat Grandmother Silk. A rune harp found near her location reveals the weavers' intent and their disappointment. Hide her deep, the despised child, our shame shown in shell of iron. She's a wish-cast vein, divinity mimicked in form too frail. Eva was too frail, too weak, hidden away in shame. She claims to be a child of the weavers, but not their kin, stating that she is imprisoned here, but it's not through malice. Eva also mentions how weavers can't have children, at least not without it being incredibly painful. So Eva may have been one of their experiments to solve this reproductive curse, but ultimately that plan had failed, so they hid her away. Every attempt ended the same way. Grandmother Silk was simply too powerful. But the weavers had one advantage their mother didn't expect. They had inherited her gift for song. If they couldn't kill her, maybe they could put her to sleep. It took everything they had. Every rebel weaver working in concert, their voices weaving together into a lullaby of impossible complexity. They enlisted mortal bugs too, creatures who didn't fully understand what they were doing but were goaded into defiance by weaver influence. The mask maker recalls this moment when speaking with Hornet. Our mortal mob did once act some defiance, unawares maybe, but successful in part, goaded toward it by the weaver's will. Together this unlikely army faced a god. The battle must have been catastrophic. Grandmother Silk was a pale being of immense power, the primal source of all silk, a creature who could dominate minds and reshape reality with her threads. The weavers, even combined, were merely her creations, elevated bugs with a fraction of her power. The mortal bugs who fought alongside them would have been like insects attacking a god. We don't know the details, we only know the outcome. Somehow, impossibly, they won. Grandmother Silk fell, not dead, but sleeping, wrapped in a cocoon of her own silk, placed in a cradle at the highest point of a structure the weavers built specifically to contain her. They called it the Citadel of Song. The mask maker explains this in no uncertain terms. You speak of the Citadel. Its former function has failed, but I can still sense its purpose some. It is church and cage both. Devised by your ancestors, that monstrosity, and their wicked, clever minds. A system, or a web they'd likely call it, a way to keep their mother sealed in slumber and themselves free to lavish in their false rule. It was beautiful, it was grand, and it was a prison. Here's the thing about putting a god to sleep. You have to keep them asleep. The lullaby couldn't stop. The moment the singing ceased, Grandmother Silk would wake, and everything the weavers had sacrificed would be for nothing. But the weavers were dying. Their numbers had been decimated by the war. They carried a curse that made reproduction agonizingly difficult. They couldn't maintain the song forever, so they did something unforgivable. They created a religion. They told the bugs of Farloom that the Citadel was holy, that climbing to its peak would cleanse their sins, that joining the eternal choir was the highest honour a bug could achieve. They usurped the position of deity that Grandmother Silk had held, establishing themselves as the divine figures worthy of worship. They used their power over bugs' minds and their skill with silk to launch a propaganda campaign, revising history, erasing the memory of Grandmother Silk from the collective consciousness of Farloom's population. Evidence throughout the game suggests the weavers were worshipped by the people of Farloom. Weaver shrines can be found throughout the land, and most important are the presence of effigies, small objects used in times of prayer. These bugs are praying to specific weavers like the Weaver of Time for prosperity and grace, reinforcing that the bugs of Farloom had worshipped these beings at one point, although they may not have done so willingly. The Needlin dialogue from the corpse found in the ruins of the nameless town tells part of this story. Friends seduced, sweet promises whispered, the weaving ones beckon. The residents of that town on the surface, along with bugs from many other settlements, were drawn down into Farloom by the weavers' songs. They came willingly, believing they were being called to something holy, something worthy of devotion and sacrifice. They drew pilgrims from across the land with promises of salvation. And those pilgrims, generation after generation, sang the songs that kept Grandmother Silk sleeping. They never knew what they were really doing. They never knew the Citadel was a cage. They just believed and worked and sang and died and were replaced by new believers who would do the same. The poem Farloom's Folly, written by conductor Amino, captures the essence of this deception. They see your beauty, so frail and fine. They see your peace, woven of faith and toil. They forget your heart, bound in slumber and servitude. When you wake, they shall see your truth, a beast nature bare to all. To manage this elaborate system, the weavers founded 3 co-equal orders within the Citadel of Song, each charged with specific responsibilities in maintaining the kingdom and the prison at its heart. The conductors were established as stewards of Farloom, charged with guiding the kingdom's future and directing its decisions. They were the primary authority within the Citadel, the ones who issued edicts and sanctioned projects. Most crucially, the conductors bore the responsibility of ensuring that the Silksong keeping Grandmother Silk asleep never ceased. The Vault Keepers were established as the preservers and protectors of knowledge. Housed within the Whispering Vaults, a vast library of scrolls and sacred texts, they were responsible for delivering sermons, leading prayers, documenting and preserving Farloom's history, and rooting out those not deemed sufficiently fervent in their faith. The architects represent the most unusual of the three factions. They were not bugs in the traditional sense, but automatons, creations of cogwork and silk designed to imitate life. The architects were charged with building and administering the cogwork core, the mechanical heart of the Citadel that ensured all programs ran smoothly. A rune harp given to conductor Ballador before the last Weaver's death conveys the weight of this burden. Sisters, spiders, the burden is past. These simple bugs shall bear it full, never to cease, never to silence. We shall die and wait and pray that one may come of silk and strength enough to weave us free. The weavers watched this system take hold, watched it work exactly as designed, and then they did the most cowardly thing imaginable. They left. Maps found in the Weave Nests show escape routes out of Farloom. In Weave Nest Syndril in Far Fields, Hornet can find a map depicting pathways out of Farloom. The nearby rune harp contains a desperate plea. Flee, sisters, flee until your strength exhausts. So far you may escape at last her silken sight. To start anew, to sustain, free of web and service eternal. The Weaver's exodus was not a single event but an ancient diaspora that played out over time. Entire clans of sisters fled Farloom to distant lands, scattering in every direction in hopes of escaping the pull of Grandmother Silk's influence. Some reached as far as Hallownest, where they would establish themselves in Deep Nest under a queen named Hera. We remember from Hollow Knight that some weavers had arrived from a distant land and settled in Hallownest, and now we know what that distant land was. Having just escaped from one pale being, they had no interest in submitting to another, which explains why the weavers of Deep Nest never fully submitted to the Pale King's rule. They had seen first-hand what servitude to a pale being meant, and they would not willingly enter that arrangement again. They left behind a sleeping god, a fragile prison, and countless bugs whose lives would be consumed by a lie. But they also left behind hope. A few weavers chose to stay, to wait in shrines throughout Farloom for a prophesied saviour. They established weaver shrines throughout Farloom, sanctuaries where they prepared their final resting places. These shrines are remarkable structures, seemingly hewn from stone or else fossilized remains of weaver bodies. They both honor lives gone and preserve the spiritual essence of the deceased. The weavers interred in these shrines are suspended between life and death. Though they have long since decayed physically, the shrines carry their lingering silk memories and just enough soul to potentially resurrect them if the right variables align. When Hornet, a bug of weaver blood, approaches these shrines during her journey through Farloom, they activate automatically. Each tells her the same message: daughter of a distant land, we who remained have waited long. Bind our strength to yours. Reclaim the future of our haunted kingdom. The weavers who remained did so with specific purpose, to wait for one of their own kind, one strong enough to finally solve the problem they had failed to solve, to free Farloom from Grandmother Silk's threat once and for all. With the Weavers gone, the Citadel fell into the hands of the three factions they had established. For a while it worked. The song continued. Grandmother Silk slept. Pilgrims climbed and sang and believed, but the Weavers had made a critical mistake. They had created a system designed to exploit faith, and then they had handed it to bugs who didn't fully understand its purpose. What do you think happened next? The Citadel became corrupt. Of course it did. Without the first children to provide guidance and authority, without their mystical abilities to cloud minds and bend wills, the true purpose of the Citadel began to fade from collective knowledge. The three factions retained some understanding, particularly the conductors, but each generation knew less than the one before. Details were lost, priorities shifted, the mission began to change. The upper castes grew wealthy on tithes extracted from desperate pilgrims. The nobility and leading members of the clergy, particularly the choristers and high-ranking vault-keepers, accrued immeasurable wealth through tithes gathered from lower castes. The concept of sin became a weapon, wielded to force bugs into servitude. Work harder. The automated confession booths told everyone who entered, "Your devotion will be noticed." It never was. In the underworks, bugs laboured in smog-filled tunnels, cleaning machinery, hauling supplies, dying in industrial accidents. These bugs believe in the Citadel and its holy power and work to be noticed. Some clean the walls, polish the floors, and make sure the Citadel is in working order, even cleaning places that are incredibly dangerous, like near the lava pits. Others can be seen checking equipment and supplies and shipping them up to the Citadel or operating machinery that powers things within. As you can see from their muted colour palette and dreary eyes, they are underserved and overworked. The conditions of the underworks are terrible thanks to the smog from the deadly machinery. Near the top of their domain is a bench, but you have to pay rosaries to use it. Worse, once you get up, it goes back onto the floorboards, requiring you to pay for it again. Most bugs in Silksong drop rosaries. Those of the Citadel make for some excellent rosary farms, as they drop a healthy amount quite consistently. Those of the underworks barely have any. In fact, most of the pilgrims you find in Bone Bottom often drop more rosaries than those of the underworks. They believed, truly believed, that their suffering would eventually be rewarded. A bug named Loam spends his entire existence spinning cogs, convinced that someday the Citadel will notice his devotion. He cannot rest, he says. Us works and Citadel breathes, and thems above do sing, and all is right. And when us works enough, them see it, and us gets us holy reward. He runs faster when he thinks about the paradise waiting for him. He will never see it. No one ever does. The slab is worse. It's a prison, technically, but the prisoners aren't the only ones trapped. The guards are descendants of bugs who committed some ancient sin so terrible it's been forgotten. According to one of the penitents there, the guards used to be penitents like him. Back in the old days, one of their ilk committed a sin that was so bad that even though it's been forgotten to time, their punishment continues. This bug and their people would then become the jailers for the new wave of sinners that would inevitably come through. But not just them, but their children, and their children's children would all be forced into this life forever. Creatures like the scab flea are described as young, born and grown in service to the slab. This is thanks to the brood mother, who is the one who births all these jailers within the slab. To serve here in this prison in service of the Citadel is their only hope for absolution. The jailers and the jailed are both serving life sentences, and neither group will ever be free. When Hornet meets the old penitent, a bug who's been locked in the slab for longer than he can remember, she offers to free him. He refuses. "By the grace of the Citadel, I am here as a penitent," he says. "Here, I can hide from the shame of my sins until they are withered away by time. Leave this place. Please, strike me down dead before you speak such blasphemy again." The manipulation is so complete that the victims defend their own imprisonment. Outside the Citadel, things are somehow worse. Greymore used to grow food. The duo Krul and Benjen say that while the Moors catch the threads of the Citadel, it didn't used to be this way. The people of the Moors used to grow a bounty of different food before the Citadel forced them to catch their falling thread. Now its people catch silk dregs that fall from above, forced to abandon farming for the Citadel's convenience. They breed muck roaches for meat because it's that or starve. These bugs breed very fast, so they use them as cattle, which prevents them from starving. The ranchers are equipped with chains and blades to make sure the muck roaches don't eat them. The food is then taken further in, where Chef Lugi is stationed. They were a former Citadel chef who was expelled for repeated culinary crimes, so they return to their home where, along with their helpers, they clean and chop up the muck roaches so they can be served to the people. As Krul tells it, it's dangerous work and not the most delectable meal you could have, but it's better than starving. Bielwater used to have clean streams. A talk with Chakra reveals that the water here used to be clean. In fact, a brief spot far from the Citadel hints at what it used to be. Now it's a toxic swamp choked with the Citadel's waste, home to the Stilkin who hate everything the Citadel represents. Their leader, Grow the Great, along with the Stilkins, continues to rage against the Citadel, which chokes their caves and sees them suffer. "Their shells are ours, their souls are ours," Grow declares. "Our hate is forever. Hate for the light, hate for their pins, for their waste poured thick and endless. Fill your hearts with hate, for power has now been claimed, and with it we shall punish. The pilgrim's path itself is built on bones, literally. So many bugs have died trying to reach the Citadel that their shells have formed a foundation. All across Bone Bottom and the Marrow are the discarded shells of bugs. Reaching the Citadel requires you to climb up to its ornate door. Due to this and how high the mortality rate is, many bugs die during their pilgrimage, many dying atop the shells of their fellows, thus creating this pile of corpses. So not only are the bugs required to climb over their own people just to reach the Citadel, but because of how many have died, they literally serve as the foundation for all of Farloom. Removing this mound would cause many structures, including the Citadel, to collapse. It's almost too on the nose to say that the Citadel is built on the backs of others, and through all of this, Grandmother Silk sleeps, but not peacefully. The Citadel's obsession with silk, their experiments in the surgical bays of Whitewood, where they injected the substance directly into bugs' shells to extend their lives, created an unintended consequence. The Oath of the Whitewood makes the Citadel's reasoning explicit. While song must be sung, none may falter. Infirmity, sickness, death, all are banished from our Citadel. The Citadel couldn't afford to lose bugs to death because they needed to continue singing the song, keeping Grandmother Silk in slumber. If bugs did die, their bodies were cremated so the silk could be recovered. But this process of recycling silk over and over again caused the wills and pain of these bugs to live on through the silk, trapped in a state of torture even after death. Silk seeped into everything, the water, the air, the very hearts of Farloom's inhabitants. The learned pilgrim, A bug who conducted gruesome research by cutting into other bugs left notes describing what they found. In the air, the water, everywhere, inside their shells, twisted inside, guts, tightest around heart, pulsing rhythm. The silk had worked its way into the very hearts of Farloom's bugs, wrapping around their vital organs, becoming part of their physical structure. And silk, remember, comes from Grandmother Silk. It is her essence, her power, her will made manifest. When bugs filled themselves with silk, they created a direct connection to the sleeping god. The chapel maid and the caretaker conclude that the threads implanted into pilgrims from the Whitewood experiments would be carried down into their offspring, making future generations even more susceptible to silk's influence. She began to stir. Her dreams leaked into their minds. Her desires became their compulsions. This is the haunting. Not a disease, not a curse, but the slow awakening of a god who was never meant to sleep forever. Heart of the haunting, Grandmother Silk's journal entry reads, long lulled to slumber and desperate to wake, the haunting spread slowly at first. Whispers in the back of bugs' minds, urges they couldn't explain, small corruptions that most didn't even notice. But as Grandmother Silk grew stronger, as her consciousness pushed harder against the songs that bound her, the haunting became impossible to ignore. Bugs stopped being themselves. They repeated tasks endlessly, mindlessly, puppeted by threads they couldn't see. The dead rose, animated by silk, shambling through the Citadel's halls to continue jobs they'd performed in life. Parvo, the mayor of Belhart, who would be temporarily caught by threads, describes the experience. It is difficult, upsetting even to think. Strange, sad memories not my own, and my own thoughts smothered amidst the tangle. If one could choose to connect themselves to something grander, that curse may seem a wonder. For myself, it now seems a horror. The song that was supposed to keep Grandmother Silk sleeping began to falter. Fewer voices, less power. The cage was failing. At some point, the Citadel finally fell into silence. Whether this was because too many bugs had died, because the cogwork core malfunctioned, because Grandmother Silk's influence made maintaining the song impossible, or some combination of these factors, we cannot say for certain. But the result was inevitable. Without the lullaby to constrain her, Grandmother Silk's awakening accelerated dramatically. Somewhere in this chaos, Grandmother Silk did something unexpected. She created daughters, not weavers, not elevated bugs, but beings spun entirely from silk, phantom, and lace. She made them because she was lonely, because her real daughters had betrayed her, because she wanted children who would love her unconditionally. The Silk Heart memory in Whitewood reveals her motivation. Better a child spun mad than none. Better a child spun frail than none. Better a child spun pure than them, one to wish our waking. From our silk, a child born loyal. But even gods make mistakes. Phantom's form degraded over time, her silk stretching thin, her shell stiffening with age. Hers is a long but still a transient life, her hunter's journal entry notes. She was hidden away in the exhaust organ, forgotten, left to fade. The caretaker describes her. Look of a child and a mind to match, but hers has been up wandering this citadel longer than most. Even in its long silence, way before you came and roused its ire. Lace maintained her form better, but she knew what she was. A mimicry, a replacement. A child created to be loyal, not loved. A silk memory found in the exhaust organ captures Lace's anguish as she questions Phantom. She spun us to fade. She spun us to break. Why us, sister? Why us? Lace resented her existence as a crude mimicry of life, a child shaped to act but never truly alive. This weak, wasting existence, she says. This was not life, just a husk, shaped to act as a child. The Citadel, desperate to maintain control, began hunting weavers. They sent choir bugs to distant lands, tracking down anyone with weaver blood, dragging them back to Farloom in rune-sealed cages. The cages used to transport these weavers can be found in the cradle, giving us insight into where they were captured. A frail bug with 1/8 weaver ancestry was found in the Sandsea Waste. Another 1/8 weaver was mortally wounded and taken in the Black Barrens, and a 1/4 ancestry weaver was staked to service and taken under the City of Steel. They found Widow, a weaver with a 1/4 of the old blood, and they broke her. They ripped off her mask, the thing that gave her identity, and drove pins into her spine to prevent her from making silk. We know from Hornet's interaction with the mask maker that masks can alter a creature's personality. Stripped of mask and silk, Widow was no match for Grandmother Silk's aura and became enthralled. What remained was a zealot, a fanatic who worshipped Grandmother Silk with the fervour of the converted. She would then serve willingly, using the haunted silk that she was allowed to use to ensnare some pilgrims while waiting patiently for her mother to wake up. And then they found Hornet. Hornet is not just any bug. She's the daughter of Hera the Beast, Queen of Deepnest, and one of the weavers who fled Farloom. She's also the daughter of the Pale King, ruler of Hallownest, which makes her half pale being herself, weaver and worm, spider and god. She carries both bloodlines, both legacies, both curses. Back in Hallownest, the Pale King needed 3 dreamers who would serve as locks, trapping the Hollow Knight in the Black Egg Temple to contain the Radiance. One of these dreamers was Hera the Beast. As part of a deal, the Pale King was to have a child with her, and that child was Hornet. In her childhood, she lived among her mother's people, those of Deepnest, including the Spider Tribe and the other weavers who fled Farloom. They taught her the power to weave threads, and she used this to craft her cloak. Hera watched over Hornet as she grew older, but only for a short time, as she would have to become a dreamer. In her absence, Hornet was looked after by the White Lady, the spouse of the Pale King, and trained by the Hive Queen Vesper. She would then eventually become a sentinel of Hallownest, watching over and protecting the dying kingdom. The weavers who raised her in Deepness saw her potential immediately. They whispered to her as she grew, trying to shape her, trying to draw out her weaver nature. The red memory in Act 3 shows the weavers watching over Hornet closely, hoping to draw out her weaver nature. Prove yourself more weaver than worm, they urged. They wanted her to be their weapon, the prophesied saviour who would return to Farloom and finish what they started. But Hera, her mother, saw through their schemes. Ignore them, daughter, she told Hornet in the red memory. Their whispers, greater, grander, weaver, guardian, queen. Those are their desires, not your own, certainly not mine. Only if you resist them, you might see it. Another hope beyond. Hera wanted Hornet to choose her own path. She understood what the other weavers wanted from Hornet. They saw her strength as a pale being combined with her weaver heritage, and they hoped she would be the one prophesied to return to Farloom and defeat Grandmother Silk. Hera, having no interest in this plan, encouraged Hornet to forge her own path, to choose her own destiny rather than accepting the one others wanted for her. And Grandmother Silk, stirring in her cradle, sensed a being of immense silken strength and wanted her too. The choral commandment that the choir bugs carried when they came for Hornet was specific. Full chamber to the kingdom of the white worm. Claim the weaver in half part. Last of their line, sensed strong with silk. Resistance anticipated. Quell with rune cage. The phrase sensed strong with silk suggests that weavers could be detected from Farloom itself, possibly through Grandmother Silk's connection to all silk, allowing her to sense when beings with strong silk power existed in the world. They captured her. They bound her in runes that suppressed her power. They carried her across vast distances to the haunted kingdom of her ancestors. And then, just as they crossed into Farloom, something strange happened. A silk fly appeared from nowhere and broke the rune on her cage. Hornet fell. She crashed into the depths of Farloom, injured and drained but free. Who sent that silk fly? The game never confirms it, but the evidence points to Lace, Grandmother Silk's rebellious daughter, jealous that her mother desired Hornet more than her, curious to see what this half-weaver could do. Lace would later demonstrate her ability to command silk flies, and she had her own complicated motivations for wanting Hornet free. It would be just like Lace to free her rival out of spite, to set up a confrontation that might hurt her mother regardless of the outcome. Whatever the reason, Hornet found herself at the bottom of Farloom with one goal: climb to the Citadel, find out why she was taken, and deal with whoever was responsible. Then I shall seek their citadel, she tells the chapel maid. If the veiled bugs would go to such lengths to bring me here, I intend to find out why. Let your breathing slow. Feel the rhythm of your heart steady and calm. The story is reaching its peak now, but there's no tension here, only the gentle unfolding of events that happened long ago in a kingdom that exists only in dreams. The journey through Farloom is where Silksong transforms from a good game into something special. Every area tells a story. Every character has a history. Every ruin whispers of what was lost. Hornet meets pilgrims who still believe in the Citadel's promises, even as the kingdom crumbles around them. She meets quiet pilgrim, fearful pilgrim, aged pilgrim, tall pilgrim, solemn pilgrim, worried pilgrim, dejected pilgrim, weary pilgrim, exhausted pilgrim, and everyone's favourite, Mort, the clerk at Pilgrim's Rest, who seems more interested in profiting off these pilgrims than helping them. She meets survivors who've given up on faith entirely. She meets Chakra, a warrior and cartographer searching for her lost master who provides aid, maps, and companionship to Hornet. She meets Cruel and Benjen, two philosophers from Greymoor who figured out that thinking too hard about the haunting is probably a bad idea. The haunting? Oh, we've got that all worked out, they say. Benjen and me are a right pair of philosophers when we bend our minds to it. It's faith that gets you. It's all caused by being too devout. Yeah. Or maybe not being devout enough. Or maybe it's safest not to think about it at all. She meets the seamstress, a former pinstress who hung up her weapons after the Citadel hunted her order to near extinction. The pinstresses were an order of pin-wielding maidens who once trained the Citadel's warriors. As the last remaining member of the cast explains, our Grand Citadel learnt well from the training of pinstresses past. Then it went and turned those teachings upon us. Despite our superior skills, our numbers have always been few and their strength overwhelmed. Of my once revered order, only 2 of us remain, wormed away in Farloom's forgotten corners. The seamstress has given up her violent past turning to stitching and sewing instead. She meets Trobbio, a performer who dreams of reigniting the Citadel's glory through the magic of theatre. She kills him on stage. It's actually kind of funny in a dark way. If defeated in Act 2, he returns as tormented Trobbio in Act 3, so depressed over the state of the world that he'd rather see it consumed, choosing to embrace the doom of the coming void. As Hornet climbs, she discovers the corpses of her ancestors, the weavers who stayed behind, who waited in shrines for generations, preserved between life and death by their own silk. When she approaches, they wake. Daughter of a distant land, they say, we who remained have waited long. Bind our strength to yours. Reclaim the future of our haunted kingdom. Each binding makes Hornet stronger. Each shrine is a gift from the dead to the living, a transfer of power across centuries. The weavers couldn't defeat Grandmother Silk themselves, but they could prepare the way for someone who might. Bellheart is where Hornet first sees the haunting's true power. The entire town is suspended in air, its residents strung up on silk threads, their minds imprisoned by a melody that won't stop playing. The source is Widow, the broken weaver, strumming her silk like a harp, binding the townspeople to Grandmother Silk's will as an offering to her beloved god. Our mother true, our light divine, Widow says, wake, glory to you. Hornet defeats her and claims the needle-in, an instrument that lets her play music on silk threads. It's more than a weapon. It's a key. When Hornet plays the needle-in near certain bugs, she can hear their thoughts, their memories, their deepest fears. The weavers use music to control. Hornet uses it to understand. Lace appears throughout the journey, taunting, challenging, testing. She's jealous and angry and confused. She wants her mother to love her. She wants to prove she's worthy. She wants to kill Hornet for being the daughter Grandmother Silk actually desires. Their fights are brutal and beautiful. Two warriors who are more alike than either wants to admit. Both are daughters struggling against expectations. Both carry burdens they didn't choose. Both have to decide whether to accept the roles assigned to them or forge their own paths. Hornet faces two possible paths to the Citadel. One route takes her through the blasted steps, where she has to ring 5 bells located in bell shrines throughout Farloom and defeat the last judge at the peak. These bells, likely created by the weavers as tools to draw pilgrims to the holy path, ring out across the kingdom when activated. The last judge, a massive bug who stands as final arbiter before the Citadel's grand gate, tests the worthiness of any pilgrim who reaches that threshold. Given the countless husks near their stations, it's clear that most didn't pass. The alternate path leads through Sinner's Road into the mist, a strange region of warped space filled with silk flies and vengeful wraiths. By playing her needle in for the silk flies, Hornet can navigate this labyrinth to reach the exhaust organ, where she confronts Phantom. The silk-spun daughter desires a glorious death in combat rather than wither away in decline, and Hornet grants her wish, opening a path to the Citadel through its hidden back entrance. The Citadel, when Hornet finally reaches it, is both more and less than she expected. Grand halls filled with corpses, beautiful architecture draped in silk, the eternal song reduced to silence, maintained only by automated machines in the cogwork core. The 3 factions are shadows of what they were. The conductors are nearly extinct. The vault keepers guard secrets they no longer understand. The architects continue their work because they were built to, not because anyone needs them to. Upon entering the Citadel, Hornet finds it seemingly empty until Lace appears to taunt her. When Hornet mentions that she knows a higher being is responsible for the haunting, Lace mocks her, saying she has no chance of defeating Grandmother Silk. Hornet replies, "I've found those who claim themselves a god can rarely match the title, and experience tells me even gods can fall." This defiant statement causes Grandmother Silk to scream, and the citadel comes to life as her threads animate the corpses of countless bugs, filling the halls with shambling husks bound to her will. Conductor Ballador, the last of his line, lies dying in his chambers, kept alive by silk pumped into his shell. He gives Hornet his melody and his regrets. The mantle of rule, he tells her, claimed greedily from Farloom's fading first children, those bitter weavers. It was yoke, not crown. Now, in our citadel's silence, we share their truth. Only one monarch's claws ever clutched this kingdom, though we raised our voices to cry otherwise. To reach Grandmother Silk, Hornet must gather the threefold melody, songs held by each of the three factions. She fights through the cogwork core, climbs the whispering vaults, ascends the high halls. She faces the cogwork dancers, automatons created from the soul of Vidania's sacrificed prince, still performing their ballet of death, even though the lover they were modelled after is long gone. When she destroys them, she frees a soul that's been trapped for centuries. The Green Prince, watching from his cage in Sinner's Road, finally has his partner back. They can rest together now. Lace waits at the foot of the cradle for one final confrontation. She's desperate, furious, heartbroken. Why, her mother! She screams through her attacks. "See me cut, see me serve. A child too broken. I will not fade, I will not break. See me your knight, see me your daughter." But Grandmother Silk doesn't want Lace. She wants Hornet, and Lace knows it. After Hornet defeats her, Lace doesn't die. She just stops. "Head on," she says, exhausted. "Climb up and away. You've earned your audience with the divine. Face the Holy Mother who would fashion so cruel and crude a daughter as me. After all, it's you that she wants, is it not?" And then Hornet faces Grandmother Silk. The pale monarch is wrapped in a cocoon that pulses with power, threads extending from her form like the strings of a puppet master. She's been sleeping for so long, dreaming of devotion, and now she's finally awake. The fight is everything you'd expect from a battle against a god. Grandmother Silk moves with terrible grace, her attacks weaving patterns of silk that fill the arena. She demonstrates complete mastery of thread, pin, and needle. Her shredding grasp is one of the few attacks in the game that deals 3 masks of damage. She is ancient and powerful and utterly convinced of her right to rule. Interestingly, Grandmother Silk is one of the few creatures that doesn't respond to the Needle-In. The primal source of silk and weavers, she's immune to their magic, offers no song, only hatred. Hornet is faster, more agile, carrying the strength of her ancestors and the training of queens. She wins. She plunges her needle into Grandmother Silk's form, and here's where the game asks you to make a choice. Not explicitly, not through a menu, but through your actions. If you simply defeat Grandmother Silk without preparation, Hornet binds the pale being's power to herself. Her crest expands immensely. Her masks transform into weaver-style forms. Her body grows additional pairs of arms. She becomes the Weaver Queen, the new monarch of Farloom. Exactly what the Weavers always wanted her to be. It's not a happy ending. Hornet explicitly said she didn't want this. In conversations with the caretaker, she made her true wishes clear. I'll not deny some part of me desires that outcome. Dominance, it seems, is baked deep in my blood, as too, no doubt, for the one up top. And yet another part resists. A part over time I find myself siding with more. That part wishes not to claim a monarch's mantle. Rather, it would see my freedom regained, and this kingdom's bugs unshackled from their pale chains. The Weaver Queen ending is Hornet failing to resist. It's her becoming exactly what she fought against. This cycle continues. A new tyrant replaces the old one. Nothing really changes. She has followed the predestined path her Weaver ancestors wanted for her, claiming the monarch's mantle she explicitly said she did not desire. There's also the twisted child ending, accessed by completing Greyroot's ritual and keeping the parasite implanted until facing Grandmother Silk. In this ending, both Hornet and Grandmother Silk become encased in wood as the parasite completes its life cycle and escapes. The implications are unclear, but the image of Hornet trapped, transformed into something plant-like while something terrible is born from her suffering, suggests this is perhaps the worst possible outcome. But there's another way. The caretaker of the first shrine is more than he appears. He's a snail shaman, one of 3 living in Farloom, members of a race obsessed with soul magic. The snail shamans appeared in Hallownest too, and very little was known about them other than their ability to draw soul from creatures and use that soul in their spells. The caretaker has a plan, not to replace Grandmother Silk with another monarch, but to remove her entirely. Ready to make your play, to oust one ruler and claim her place? The caretaker asks Hornet, to which she replies, I'll not deny some part of me desires that outcome. Dominance, it seems, is baked deep in my blood, as too, no doubt, for the one up top. And yet, another part resists. A part over time I find myself siding with more. That part wishes not to claim a monarch's mantle. Rather it would see my freedom regained, and this kingdom's bugs unshackled from their pale chains. The caretaker agrees and gives her a way to do so. To create this trap, Hornet needs to gather 3 souls from the caretaker's family: the chapel maid in Moss Grotto, the bell hermit beneath Bellheart, and the seeker whose soul was stolen by Grow the Great in Bylewater. Both the chapel maid and the bell hermit give their souls willingly, but the remaining soul, the seeker's soul, is more difficult to obtain. At some point this bug travelled into Bellwater to seek the help of the Stilkin, but instead of working with this bug to fight against the Citadel, the Stilkin killed him and took his soul. Hornet has to infiltrate the Stilkin's home, Bilehaven, and defeat them and their leader, Grow the Great. She also needs the snare setter, that failed weapon the Weavers built long ago. With these components, the snail shamans construct a trap in the cradle. When Hornet defeats Grandmother Silk this time, she doesn't bind the pale being's power. She plays her needle in to activate the caretaker's trap. The snare then clamps down on the monarch, only for the snare to reveal itself to be a portal to the abyss. Void tendrils reach up from the abyss, hungry for the god's soul. Grandmother Silk tries to drag Hornet down with her, but Lace intervenes. The silk-spun daughter cuts her mother's arm, severing the connection, and falls into the void alongside the being who created her. It's an act of rebellion and sacrifice, and maybe, just maybe, love. Lace spent her whole existence trying to earn her mother's approval. In the end, she chose to save the rival her mother preferred instead. As Hornet falls, she finds her footing and watches as the trap explodes. sending her even further down the cradle. And as the game comes to a close, we can see Grandmother Silk's threads appear from beneath the ground, now covered in the black stains of the void, showing us that the void now has her powers under their command, teasing a conflict soon to come. But this victory has consequences. Grandmother Silk doesn't die quietly. Trapped in the abyss with Lace, she fights against the void's consumption, weaving silk cocoons to protect her daughter. Her struggle sends earthquakes through Farloom. Void tendrils climb from the depths, binding themselves to the silk that permeates the kingdom. Bugs become corrupted, possessed by darkness. The kingdom that was supposed to be saved is now facing destruction. This is where Act 3 begins. Most games would end with the defeat of the final boss. Silksong keeps going. Act 3 is a completely new section of Silksong, entirely hidden behind the game's true ending. The world changes. Areas you've already explored are transformed by the void's corruption. NPCs you've met are dead or displaced or possessed. The comfortable rhythms of the game are disrupted. Something is wrong, and it's your fault. Much of Farloom changes in the transition between Act 2 and 3. As a general change, most if not every environment in the game has been damaged in the destruction. Sometimes it's cosmetic, other times older areas are walled off and have to be reopened. Enemies will also now periodically become one with the void. Songclave is still holding strong, but the pilgrims are scared for their lives. Cree from the halfway home is safe, as well as the bar. Bellheart is under threat from many void-infected enemies, but Chakra has decided to stay and become the town's only protector. Pilgrim's Rest is destroyed with Mort seemingly dead as well. Bone Bottom is utterly destroyed, which forces the residents to move elsewhere. Hornet returns to the ruined chapel where she confronts the caretaker, the chapel maid, and the bell hermit, who reveal themselves to be snail shamans. Cowards, here you hide, even as you cause your own land's demise, Hornet says. They claim that their snare simply did what it was supposed to do, so what's the harm? Although Hornet rightfully calls them out for forgetting to mention that they were taking her to the abyss, they don't apologise for this, although they do admit that they did not expect this to be the outcome. They assumed Grandmother Silk would simply die from being consumed by the void, but the tendrils throughout the kingdom prove her resistance to such a fate. The reason why has to do with Lace. Grandmother Silk loves Lace. So because she was trapped inside the void with her, she is fighting to protect her. She's crafted another silk ball like the one in her chambers to shield them both from harm. Had Lace not fallen in with her, Grandmother Silk would have just resigned herself to her fate. But because she's still alive fighting its influence, the void was able to take hold of her silk, which is why they're seen everywhere in Act 3. Hornet has to go into the abyss. There's no other option. But the void is death to anything that isn't born from it. She needs protection. She remembers a flower from her childhood, the delicate flower from Hallownest, called the Everbloom in Farloom. It repels void. It's the first light, the White Lady called it. A flower like this does not grow within Farloom. However, she is convinced that with the snail shaman's magical powers, if she finds the Everbloom within an old memory of hers, she may be able to manifest its existence and bring it to the real world. To do that, a ritual will need to be performed, and it's going to require the hearts of specific warriors. Warriors that existed far before the monarch came to Farloom. Hornet will have to use a new power to go back in time and fight these beings in their prime and take their hearts. These warriors are Crust King Khan, Scarsinger Carmelita, Nihilith, and the Green Prince, although only 3 of these are necessary, so Hornet goes back in time. Not literally, but through memory, using a spell called the Elegy of the Deep. She faces Crust King Khan in his prime, when his warriors still lived and his kingdom still stood. She faces Scarsinger Carmelita, when her voice could shake mountains. She faces Nihilith, the primordial heart of Shellwood. She faces the Green Prince and his lover, dancing their ballet of death one last time. These are the hardest fights in the game. These are champions at the height of their power, legends made flesh. Hornet defeats them all. She takes their hearts. To save the future, she destroys the past. The snail shamans perform the ritual. It consumes the hearts. It consumes them too. They give their lives to grant Hornet the Everbloom, and she wakes holding a flower that glows with pale light. Before she descends, Hornet passes through the red memory, reliving moments from her childhood. She sees the weavers trying to shape her. She sees Hera telling her to forge her own path. She sees herself training with Hive Queen Vesper. The idea that Hornet was trained by Vesper was mentioned by Ari Gibson all the way back in 2017, but he implied the relationship might not have applied anymore. But years later, Team Cherry has finally confirmed it, and she sees the White Lady, her stepmother, the queen who helped raise her after Hera became a dreamer. The White Lady tries to justify the creation of the vessels, those children she and the Pale King made and discarded in their attempt to contain the Radiance. She expects Hornet to judge her harshly. I knew the wish and the price to achieve it, the White Lady says, and now, across these many ages, I have only come to know it better. Strength enough that I may live to see a world better than our own, or to craft a world as I desire. That was the wish of my mother, of my mentor, and of you. The White Lady responds, "Indeed, Spider, for her you become, who knows clear our desire and has seen full the darkness beneath our house. I would show you the gift, witness the first light, the only means we possess to resist that void with which our family is forever linked. Reach forth, child, grown strong, wrest it from this remembrance. Burn yourself free from our sad fate." Hornet's response is simple. You are wrong. She doesn't reject the complexity of their choice. She rejects the arrogance that assumes only a higher being can understand sacrifice. She proves that compassion isn't weakness, it's strength. The White Lady offers her the Everbloom, and Hornet takes it. The descent into the abyss is the loneliest part of the game. Dark corridors, void tendrils, the weight of an entire kingdom pressing down. The abyss in Farloom is very similar to the one found in Hallownest. It features the same void tendrils, a lake of void, and massive spires. There's even hints of the ancient civilization here too. Hornet refers to the void as being below all things, perhaps indicating that no matter where you are in the world of Hollow Knight, if you go down far enough, you'll find the abyss. Hornet finds Grandmother Silk deep beneath the surface, wrapped in silk, still fighting, still protecting Lace. And she finds Lace herself, corrupted by void, but still alive, still fighting. Lace, never one to waste an opportunity to mock Hornet, somehow astral projects herself into the room and tells Hornet that there's nothing she can do to save Farloom. Lace explains that she saved Hornet as an act of rebellion against her mother for creating her so frail, and seems to relish in the idea of dooming her mother and all of Farloom along with her. But Hornet remains determined, claiming that she will acquire the bloom that repels the dark. Oblivion may take you, child, Hornet says. My own life I shall not sacrifice. I have survived the fury of your land. I have borne its barbs and its blades, and I have seen wonder behind its dangers. But always, child, I remain a daughter of Hallownest, and the void below all things. That darkness I will fear no longer. This is the last line of dialogue in the game before the true ending, and it's also the only time in the entire game the word Hallownest is spoken. The final boss isn't Grandmother Silk, it's Lost Lace, the daughter who fell, twisted by darkness but not destroyed. Hornet fights her, but not to kill, she fights to free. Each blow strips away more of the void's corruption. Each strike is an act of salvation, not violence. When Lace is finally cleansed, Hornet shows Grandmother Silk something unexpected. They want the same thing. They both want to save Lace. The Pale Monarch, the god who demanded absolute devotion, the being who created an entire race just to worship her, makes a choice. She gives Hornet the last of her silk, enough power to escape the abyss. It's a sacrifice. It's an act of love. Grandmother Silk lets the void take her so her daughter can live, but it's not enough. Hornet and Lace rise through the void, but the Everbloom's petals are disintegrating. The darkness closes in. They're going to die. And then the night appears. If you played Hollow Knight, you know the night. The little vessel, born from void, who journeyed through Hallownest and faced the Radiance. During the events of Hollow Knight, we learn that the Knight was one of the many vessels created by the Pale King to subdue the Radiance. The Hollow Knight was ultimately the chosen vessel, while the rest were simply discarded, left to wander the abyss. Throughout the game, the Knight would learn of their origin, reunite the abyss and the vessels, and during the true ending would reveal their current form, Void-given form. However, we briefly saw another form known as Void-given Focus, or the Shade Lord. This was only accessible during the Godmaster DLC, but it only appears for a brief moment and is never seen again. And now, in Silksong, the Knight returns, not as a playable character but as a saviour. The Knight and the countless shades who dwell in the abyss recognise Hornet. She is their sister, after all. Half-sister, technically, but family is family. They banish the void that threatens her. They carry her and Lace to the surface. They save her life. It's a moment that ties both games together in the most beautiful way possible. The Knight, who was abandoned by the Pale King, who was created to be hollow, who was never supposed to have feelings or desires, chooses to save Hornet. The vessels, those discarded children, have found purpose. They have found agency. They have found something like love. Hornet and Lace wake on the surface. The void retreats. The earthquakes stop. Grandmother Silk is gone, truly gone, consumed by the darkness she fought so hard against. Farloom is free, not because Hornet claimed the throne, not because she became a new tyrant, but because she broke the cycle entirely. She saved the kingdom without ruling it. She liberated the bugs without enslaving them. She remained herself. This ending is called Sister of the Void. Farloom and its White Knight have been saved from complete destruction, and the system of endless song and toil has finally been eradicated. The game ends with Hornet giving Lace the Weaver stare while Lace laughs. Two daughters who struggled against their mother's expectations, who fought each other and saved each other, who might just be friends now. It's a small moment, quiet and human, and it's perfect. So why is Hollow Knight, Silksong a masterpiece? Let me count the ways. It's a masterpiece of world building. Farloom feels real in a way that most game worlds don't. Every area has history, every character has motivation, every ruin tells a story. Team Cherry doesn't explain things to you. They trust you to observe, to wonder, to piece together the truth from fragments. When you understand what happened to the Crust Kingdom, when you realise why the Cogwork dancers fight as a pair, when you finally grasp the full horror of the Citadel's exploitation, you feel like you've discovered something. You feel like an archaeologist uncovering secrets that have been buried for centuries. It's a masterpiece of theme. The game asks hard questions about power and freedom, about truth and deception, about the lies we tell ourselves and the systems we participate in. The Weavers escaped slavery only to create a system that enslaved others. The Citadel promised salvation and delivered exploitation. Grandmother Silk demanded love and received only fear. These aren't simple morality tales. They're explorations of how oppression perpetuates itself, how victims become victimizers, how the desire for control corrupts even the best intentions, and the answer the game offers isn't cynicism, it's hope. Hornet breaks the cycle. She proves that it's possible to have power without using it to dominate, to be strong without being cruel, to save a kingdom without ruling it. When Hornet refuses to become the Weaver Queen, she's not just making a gameplay choice. She's rejecting the destiny that others wrote for her. She's proving that she is more than her bloodline, more than her heritage, more than the expectations placed upon her. She is herself, and that is enough. It's a masterpiece of character. Hornet is one of the gaming's great protagonists. She's competent and compassionate, fierce and thoughtful. She has opinions about the world she inhabits. She makes jokes. She gets angry. She feels like a person, not a vessel for player agency, and the supporting cast is just as strong. Lace's arc from jealous rival to reluctant ally to sacrificial hero is genuinely moving. Grandmother Silk's final act of maternal love recontextualizes everything we thought we knew about her. Even minor characters like Loam, the bug who spins cogs forever believing his devotion will be rewarded, stick with you long after you've moved on. It's a masterpiece of design. The Silk system forces you to think strategically in ways that Hollow Knight's soul system didn't. In Hollow Knight, the knight used soul, a resource gathered by striking enemies, to heal and cast spells. In Silksong, Hornet uses silk, which she produces within her own shell. This change reflects Hornet's nature as a Weaver descendant. Silk can be used to heal, to craft tools, to bind enemies, to create platforms. It is versatile and powerful, but it is also limited. Hornet must manage her silk carefully, deciding when to heal and when to save her resources for other purposes. The Needlin adds a layer of exploration and discovery that rewards curiosity. The 3-act structure allows for narrative complexity that most Metroidvanias can't support. The boss fights tell stories through combat, their mechanics reflecting their characters' histories and motivations. Everything works together. Everything reinforces everything else, and it's a masterpiece of music. Christopher Larkin's score is essential to the experience, not just accompaniment but narrative. The Citadel's theme suggests false majesty. The Underwork's theme evokes oppression and despair. The Abyss sounds like the absence of sound, like the void between notes. When you enter a new area, the music tells you what kind of place this is before you encounter a single enemy. When you face a boss, the music tells you who they are. But more than any of that, Silksong is a masterpiece because it understands something fundamental about stories. The best narratives aren't about what happens, they're about what it means. The plot of Silksong is relatively simple. Hornet is captured, escapes, climbs to the Citadel, defeats the god, saves the kingdom. You could summarize it in a sentence, but the meaning of Silksong is vast and complex and deeply human. It's about the weight of expectation and the freedom of choice. It's about the lies we inherit and the truths we discover. It's about mothers and daughters, about love that controls and love that liberates. It's about the courage to break cycles that have persisted for generations. When Grandmother Silk sacrifices herself to save Lace, she's not just dying. She's finally, after centuries of demanding devotion, giving something instead of taking. She's proving that even gods can change, that even the hungriest beings can learn to love without conditions. When the knight saves Hornet, it's not just a cool cameo, it's the culmination of both games' themes. The vessels were created to be hollow, to have no will, no desire, no self. The knight's choice to save its sister proves that they were always more than what they were made to be. They were always capable of love. These moments resonate because they're true. Not literally true, obviously. There is no Farloom, no Grandmother Silk, no Hornet, but emotionally true, spiritually true. We all struggle against expectations. We all inherit lies from those who came before us. We all have to decide whether to perpetuate cycles or break them. Silksong takes these universal experiences and transforms them into a story about bugs and silk and sleeping gods, and somehow that transformation makes them clearer, more powerful, more real. Your eyes are heavy now. Your thoughts are slowing, drifting like silk on the wind. The story is ending, but stories never really end. They just pause, waiting for someone to pick them up again. Farloom sleeps at last, not the false sleep of imprisonment, but the true sleep of peace. The Citadel stands empty, its halls silent, its purpose finally fulfilled. The pilgrims who survived are free to choose their own paths. The workers in the underworks can rest without paying rosaries. The bugs of Greymoor can grow food again. The Stilkin can clean their waters. The cycle is broken. The chains are gone. And somewhere, in a kingdom far away, Hornet continues her journey. She is the daughter of beast and worm, the princess of two kingdoms, the saviour of a third. She carries the strength of her ancestors and the lessons of her mothers. She knows that dominance is baked into her blood, and she chooses compassion anyway. She knows that power corrupts, and she refuses to be corrupted. She is herself, fully and completely, and that is the greatest victory of all. Dream of silk and song tonight. Dream of kingdoms that rise and fall, of gods that sleep and wake, of daughters who rebel, and mothers who learn to let go. Dream of the abyss and the light that repels it. Dream of the night, that little vessel, saving its sister from the dark. And when you wake, remember this. Cycles can be broken. Lies can be exposed. Freedom can be won. Not through violence alone. Not through power alone, but through compassion, through choice, through the simple refusal to become what others expect you to be. That's why Hollow Knight. Silksong is a masterpiece, not because it's beautiful, though it is. Not because it's challenging, though it is. Not because it's deep, though it is. But because it's true. Because it understands something about the human condition and expresses it through the language of games in a way that no other medium could. Sleep well, traveller. The kingdom of Farloom is at peace, and so, perhaps, are you. Good night. But wait, before you drift off completely, there's more to this story. More details that make Silksong special. More reasons why this game will be remembered long after we're gone. consider the environmental storytelling. Team Cherry doesn't just tell you that the Citadel is corrupt, they show you. They show you the automated confession booth that tells everyone to work harder regardless of what they confess. They show you the bench in the underworks that costs rosaries to use and resets when you stand up. They show you the bulletin board in a Ventrica station that reads, "Due to unacceptably high injury and unsanctioned deaths, Ventrica travel shall henceforth be denied to all. For Farloom Eternal, a bug who serves must never die." This Citadel doesn't want its bugs to die, not out of concern for their well-being, but because dead bugs can't serve. Death became a sin, an act of defiance against the Eternal Order. Consider the cogwork core, that massive structure of cogs and shafts in the middle of the Citadel. The last edict of the conductors celebrates its completion, and lo, is eternity sustained. By Architect's claw, we welcome that final form of dial and rotor and soul gladly given. The perfect unfaltering voice. The core was built to sustain the song automatically. Built like a massive music box with cylinders covered in pips, with bells and cymbals in its depths, and with rows of statues capable of producing song at its peak. The core could maintain the lullaby that kept Grandmother Silk asleep without requiring living bugs to sing. Even the maintenance could be done by cogwork automatons. The act of singing, once the sacred duty of devoted pilgrims, had been outsourced to machines powered by dead souls. This might explain a peculiar detail about the Citadel's layout. The elevator at the entrance doesn't go up into the Citadel proper, but down into the underworks. If pilgrims weren't needed to sing anymore, they could simply be directed straight to the labour chambers, where their physical work could be extracted. The religious fiction could be maintained with minimal effort, and the Citadel could function as an efficient machine for converting living beings into exploitable resources. Consider the silk flies. When bugs infused with silk died, their bodies were piled high and burned in roaring cremation chambers, but their souls, bound to the silk within them, didn't pass on. Instead, they were harvested and transformed into silk flies, pale luminescent creatures that carry the trapped consciousness of the deceased. These silk flies were then used to power the cogwork automatons that populated the Citadel. Every mechanical bug, every cogwork soldier, every automated worker was powered by a silk fly, by the soul of a bug who had died believing they were serving something holy. When these machines are destroyed in the game, silk flies escape from their broken shells, finally freed from their imprisonment. The needle in dialogue near certain locations reveals their pain. Please remember my voice. To serve beyond shell, to devote eternal. Why this pain? Must we? These bugs had literally been turned into fuel, their very souls consumed to power the Citadel's machinery. Consider the 12th Architect, one of the few automatons to survive into Hornet's time. When asked about their purpose, they respond, "I am an architect, only an architect. To build, to automate, is not choice. It is nature, directive, cage." The progression of words is significant. What begins as nature quickly becomes directive and finally is acknowledged as cage. The architects were born into servitude, created specifically to serve the Citadel with no choice in their purpose, and yet, despite seeming like mindless robots, they display some level of intelligence. The second Sentinel is hardwired to kill those with the Silken Curse, but questions if Hornet is infected too, suggesting the ability to make decisions. You can use the needle in on some of them, and they have actual thoughts. one of which even says that we are together. Whether this was intended is unclear, but it seems as though not every automaton is capable of this level of thinking. Consider the fate of the pinstresses. These were an order of pin-wielding maidens who once trained the Citadel's warriors. 3 famed sisters, 3 master pinstresses, were recruited to train the Citadel's members in the way of pin and needle. As their martial prowess grew, the Citadel's authoritarian grip continued to squeeze, but at some point the Citadel turned on its own protectors. Those of sufficient will to resist the haunting's whispers, or those without silk in their shells, were hunted down by members of the choir. The pinstresses fought a valiant retreat and escape from the Citadel. The sisters parted and hid in Farloom's reaches, one to the swamps of Bylewater, one to the blasted steppes, and one to the far fields. They were heavily pursued. The 4th chorus, a massive cogwork creation, was sent to destroy one sister, but she defeated it, then donned the humble guise of a seamstress. The 3rd pinstress can be found in the putrefied ducts, but she's long dead by the time Hornet finds her. Consider the connections between Silksong and Hollow Knight. The void and the silk serve similar narrative functions, but with opposite characteristics. Where void is absence, silk is presence. Where void consumes, silk binds. Where void represents the loss of self, silk represents the imposition of another's will. Both substances are tools of higher beings, used to create and control lesser creatures. Both can be turned against their creators. Both are central to the cosmology of the Hollow Knight universe. The true ending of Silksong brings these 2 substances into direct conflict. Grandmother Silk is trapped in the void, fighting against its consumption. Hornet uses the Everbloom, a flower that repels void, to navigate the abyss. The Night, a creature of void, saves Hornet, a creature of silk. This confrontation suggests that void and silk are not merely different substances but opposing forces, perhaps even fundamental aspects of the Hollow Knight universe's cosmology. Consider the delicate flower, or Everbloom. In Hollow Knight, Grey Mourner, one of the Pale King's 5 great knights, brought the delicate flower from a faraway land and requested that the knight take the flower to the grave of her dead lover, the traitor lord's daughter. If the knight tries to give the delicate flower to the White Lady, she declines, explaining that the flower contains a rare power. She also tells Hornet in the Red Memory that the Everbloom is the first light. The knight can give the flower to the God-Seeker, but while she recognizes it as rare and pure, she can't detect any godliness from it. However, giving the delicate flower to God-Seeker actually unlocks an alternate ending for Hollow Knight. Upon defeating the Absolute Radiance at the end of the Pantheon of Hallownest, the knight seems to take on a new form, referred to in-game as Void-Given Focus. After this transformation, the knight begins to leak out from the God-Seeker, with void tendrils lashing out from her body. However, if the God-Seeker is holding the delicate flower, God-Seeker and the void leaking from her disappear, leaving only the flower with a single stained petal. So it does indeed seem like the Everbloom can repel void. Consider the Steel Soul mode. Just like in Hollow Knight, after achieving an ending, you gain access to the game's permadeath mode. That mode also added new NPCs such as Steel Soul Jin, and the same is true for Silksong. In the Blasted Steppes, you can find Steel Seer Z. Hornet recognizes her kind, likely due to her past interactions with Jin, noting that Z's masters have likely taken an interest in this place as well. Z has a mission for Hornet that she can undertake. Z lost her vessel somewhere in Farloom and needs to find them before Z's masters send their wrath upon her. After finding all 3 rest places throughout Farloom, Hornet tracks them to a secret cave in Bone Bottom. Here we find her vessel, Sula, trying to summon the void. Sula explains that they couldn't take the constant pain that they were seeing. The land dying, the pilgrims falling, it was too much for them to bear. Sula also drops the term Steel Hearts, which finally gives us a name for Z, Jin, and their people. These Steel Hearts seem to care not for the prosperity of the land, nor its people. They only seek to observe the goings-on of the world, and that's all. This is likely for some higher purpose we can't possibly imagine just yet. Consider Mr. Mushroom. If you happen to find Mr. Mushroom in all of his predetermined locations, then the game ends with him shooting out of Farloom onto the surface, heading to places unknown. Where will the story go from here? Silksong will be getting lots of post-launch content sometime in the future, so only time will tell. These details matter. They're not just Easter eggs or fan service. They're part of a carefully constructed world that rewards attention and curiosity. Every piece of lore, every environmental detail, every character interaction adds to the whole. Silksong is a game that respects its players enough to trust them with complexity, to believe that they'll put in the work to understand what's really going on. And that's rare. That's special. That's why Silksong is a masterpiece. The kingdom of Farloom is at peace now. The Citadel stands empty. The song has finally ended. And somewhere, in the depths of the abyss, the void churns with new power, silk-stained and hungry. The story isn't over. It's just beginning. But that's a tale for another night. For now, let your eyes close. Let your breathing slow. Let the weight of the world fall away, replaced by the gentle embrace of sleep. Dream of silk and song. Dream of kingdoms lost and found. Dream of daughters who chose their own paths, and mothers who learned to let go. Sleep well, traveller. The kingdom of Farloom thanks you for listening. Good night. One final thought before you drift away completely. There's a moment in Silksong that encapsulates everything the game is trying to say. It's not a boss fight or a dramatic cutscene. It's a conversation. Hornet is speaking with the caretaker about what she wants, about what she's fighting for. And she says something that cuts to the heart of the entire experience. That part wishes not to claim a monarch's mantle. Rather, it would see my freedom regained, and this kingdom's bugs unshackled from their pale chains. Freedom, not power, not revenge, not even justice exactly, just freedom. The freedom to choose your own path, the freedom to be yourself, fully and completely, without the weight of expectation crushing you into a shape someone else designed. That's what Silksong is really about. Not silk, not song, not even the haunting of a sleeping god. It's about the fundamental human desire to be free, to make our own choices, to define ourselves on our own terms. The weavers wanted freedom from Grandmother Silk, but they achieved it by enslaving others. The Citadel promised freedom from sin, but delivered only servitude. Grandmother Silk wanted the freedom to be worshipped, but her hunger for devotion became its own kind of prison. Everyone in Farloom is trapped by something, by faith, by duty, by blood, by the lies they've been told and the lies they tell themselves. Hornet is the one who breaks free, not by becoming more powerful than everyone else, though she does, not by claiming the throne, though she could, but by choosing a different path entirely, by refusing to play the game, by walking away from power instead of seizing it. That's the message of Silksong. That's why it resonates so deeply, because we all feel trapped sometimes by our jobs, by our relationships, by our own expectations of who we're supposed to be. And Silksong tells us that it's possible to break free, that cycles can be broken, that we don't have to become what others expect us to be. It's a hopeful message delivered through a story about bugs and silk and sleeping gods, and somehow that makes it more powerful, not less. Because when you strip away the fantasy, when you look past the beautiful art and the challenging gameplay and the haunting music, what you find is a story about being human, about struggling, about choosing, about becoming. That's why Hollow Knight, Silksong is a masterpiece. Now sleep, dream of freedom, dream of choice, dream of becoming whoever you want to be. The kingdom of Farloom is at peace. And so are you. Good night, traveller. Good night,